Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwatham and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to touch on this idea of multiculturalism and how multiculturalism doesn't work, right? So before I continue, let me actually define it in the etymology online. As a matter of fact, hold on. I'll go to the AI overview, and it says multiculturalism is the presence and the coexistence of multiple cultures within a society. It can refer to the sociological fact and ideology or a set of policies aimed at managing diversity. Canada, it says, is known for an official multiculturalism policy, which was adopted in 1971 and enshrined in law through the Canadian Multiculturalism Act of 1988. This policy recognizes and promotes the multicultural heritage of Canada, encouraging diversity, equality, and inclusion. Right? So I wanted to touch on this fact that, with the growing amounts of protests, disgruntled behavior that is present amongst a lot of these Western nations. For example, you have America. It's been going on in Canada, and it's even been trickling into and happening amongst a lot of European states, a lot of European countries. So, for example, you had situations occurring, this so-called distaste for immigration in countries such as Ireland, Poland, what's that other country? You've had an influx of a lot of Israelites, especially in countries like France, the UK. So as things become a lot more difficult, you start to see a lot of people, even clinging to their own kind, right? And when you really think about it, like what I read here just a couple minutes ago, the Heavenly Father never intended us to be all in one space. The Heavenly Father really and truly is a separatist, and this is something a lot of Catholics, so-called Catholics, don't understand. Because when you go into the word Catholic, it goes back to the Greek word katholikos, meaning universal. And the Lord really and truly is a separatist. So I kind of wanted to read through a couple things and kind of go into and pick apart of what's actually going on in the world here. Because, as things become, a lot more economically difficult, you start to see a little bit more of people clinging to their own kind, right? You start to see a little bit more of people wanting to preserve their so-called sovereignty, so they stick to their own people, right? So let me start off here. Let me just get a little bit of a backdrop here, so just bear with me one second. And I sincerely pray that this lesson would be edifying, right? Okay, so I'll start off here. This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 2 verse 2, and it says, "And the Lord spake unto me, saying, Ye have compassed this mountain long enough." And the title here, it says, "Wanderings in the Wilderness." It says, "Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir. They shall be afraid of you, Take good heed unto yourselves, therefore, meddle not with them. For I will not give you their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir for Esau for a possession, right? So I wanted to read this because when you go through this chapter, the Lord is outlining that, us as an Israelites, we were getting our own land, right? So the Lord didn't mingle, us with the other nations. That's pretty much the point. Like all these other nations. So here it says they were speaking about the children of Esau. When you go on, it goes into the children of Moab and the children of Ammon. We weren't supposed to mingle, and have and share spaces, with them. They were going to have their allocated portions of land, right? And during the time of Joshua, you had, the tribes, they received their inheritance, right? And then eventually, the other tribes, the 12 tribes, they received their different portions, of the land, right? But the point I'm reading this is to show that the Lord designed it so we would have our own space, so to speak. And what you see in this Babylon the Great and all these different countries that follow after this Babylonian all coming together mindset is essentially a combination and amalgamation of all these other nations into one space, which is showing that it doesn't work, right? There's essentially no cohesion. There's a lot of differences. There's a lot of the people don't actually truly mix, because the Heavenly Father really and truly is a separatist. He's not somebody, he's not universal. All these nations, will always cleave to their own kind. And this is what happens in very, very developed countries such as Canada, the US, England. People might think that, because of immigration, the society would become a lot more diverse. It just looks diverse, but it doesn't actually operate in a diverse, because you have different kinds of people, different spirits of people just sharing the same physical space, right? So let me go to because that little excerpt I read there earlier, these nations don't understand that you can't override what the Heavenly Father has ordained. Excuse me. This is Deuteronomy 32:8, and it says, "For when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, and Jacob is the lot of his inheritance," right? So we had our own inheritance. We our own physical land. We didn't have, and we weren't sharing our lands. We weren't sharing our physical spaces, with these other nations, right? We had our own, space. Even when you go back into, I believe it's the 7th chapter, the Lord, when we were going into the land, the Lord didn't even want us to, mix, our children, our sons and daughters with those different Hamitic nations, right? Because the Lord understood that, when we were going into that land, we were, there's a chance that you can become susceptible to their vibration of their gods, right? Because we were supposed to be, and we are and still, a holy people unto the Lord, right? This is why, going back to the title, this is why multiculturalism doesn't work. It actually causes more of a detriment to you Israelites, because at that same point I was bringing out earlier, because we fall into their different ways, these different customs that is contrary to our customs. The scriptures say that the righteous is more excellency than his neighbor, but the ways of the wicked seduceth them. And this is what happens when you're amongst a bunch of heathens that worship all these different abominable practices, right? Because as the Apostle Paul said, we're supposed to be a spouse to one husband as Israelite men. We were supposed to be a spouse to one husband, being chaste, being pure, being what's the word I'm looking for? Unadulterated, so to speak, right? This is why, again, multiculturalism doesn't work. So let me go to just bear with me. This is Isaiah 55, verse 8, and it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." Right? So, the Heavenly Father has ordained that, He is a separatist, so we don't mix, and we can't essentially, it doesn't make a difference what sort of policy that these rulers that rule over us put forth. You can't essentially circumvent what the Heavenly Father has ordained, right? That's why I'm reading this, because it says that His ways are a lot higher than our ways, right? These other nations, they put forth these different policies within their respective nations to make it seem like multiculturalism. They're very all accepting, but you see that as the economy starts to to take a downturn, you start to see essentially more people, and that, like the scriptures talk about how the love of many is waxing cold. What you see is now that more people tend to stick amongst their own kind. They're not really sticking as much as they would kind of mingle here and there, right? Because really and truly, you have a bunch of just different spirits rolling around in these different respective nations, right? And you can't have everybody all in one space. It doesn't work. Multiculturalism is something that is it's futile. It can't go as far, right? The wisdom of this world is foolish, as it says in Corinthians, right? So let me get something here. Just bear with me 1 second. This is Ecclesiasticus chapter 13, verse 15, and it says, "Every beast loveth his like." And it says, "To every man that loveth his neighbor, all flesh consorteth according to kind, and a man will cleave to his like." Continuing on, and it says, "What fellowship hath a wolf with the lamb? So the sinner with the godly," right? So you can't have, different people who believe in different things all in the same space. It ultimately doesn't work, right? People will still cleave and cling to their own kind at the end of the day. So, for example, I'll just use Brampton as an example, because Brampton, you have in Canada, you have a lot of so-called like Elamites, South Asian people. They cling to their own people. They establish their own businesses. They provide their own foods. They go and shop at their own grocery stores. This, that, and the fourth, right? They're clinging to their own kind, right? You might share a space with them, but your spirit as an Israelite, it does not unless they're like maybe, you know, an Israelite that maybe look like Elamite, because you have those also, but still at the same time, those people are still going to, you're still going to be drawn to your own people. And this is not a color thing, as again, because one of the things I've witnessed also is that even as the precept I just read, I'll read it again actually. It says, verse 16, and it says, all flesh consorteth to according to kind, and a man will cleave to his like. So, okay, somebody can say, oh, well, require, I've seen like a Chinese man and a so-called black man, and an Hispanic man all chilling together. And most likely they're all Israelites, right? Because only Israelites will be drawn to their own people, right? We have a specific spirit that differs from the spirit of these other nations, right? That's why they cling to their kind, because they know we're not like them, and we also know they are not like us, right? We know we're a lively people. We know that we're a holy people. We know that we're an upright people, right? This is verse 17, and it says, what agreement is there between the hyena and a dog? And what peace between the rich and the poor, right? So there's a difference. There's a difference in the spirit, and it doesn't make a difference how much legislation that Esau puts forth, how much immigration laws, how much immigration quotas these other nations put forth. It doesn't really make a difference, because all that matters is, that the Lord has a special people unto himself, and all these other nations, they can't, they're going to just cleave and cling to their own people, right? One of the things that, the especially the Catholic Church, doesn't understand is that they don't know that the Heavenly Father has, he's a separatist, and they don't understand that, he has favorites. Just bear with me. Excuse me. This is 2 Ezra chapter 5, verse 23, and it says, and I said, O Lord, that bearest rule of every wood of the earth, and of the trees thereof, thou hast chosen thee one only vine. And all the lands of the whole world, thou hast chosen thee one pit, and of the flowers thereof one lily, right? So the Lord only has one chosen specific group of people. And it says in Psalms that he hath not dealt so with any other nation, right? That land is ours, right? And the Heavenly Father has favorites. Like, I'm just listing the favorites here. Here it says the lily, right? I'll read that again, and it says, and all the lands of the whole world thou hast chosen thee one pit, and of all the flowers thereof one lily, right? So the Lord has favorites, right? And it doesn't, and going back to the point I've said earlier, it really doesn't make a difference how much legislation that is pushed forth, right? Because now you're seeing how fragmented that legislation actually is as the economy starts to actually become more difficult. As you see, you see more examples of, as the scriptures say, the love of many waxing cold, and spirits created for vengeance. You're starting to see all these different people coming in that are being let into these other nations, right? It's causing a lot of, people that are been living in a country for so long, they're starting to realize they can't, they're having a strong distrust towards their government, right? And B, they're noticing, and then they're slowly starting to cling to their own people to hold on to their so-called little fragments of sovereignty, right? So as things become more difficult, you start to see a lot of our a lot of the other nations, they're clinging, and they're going to cling more to their own kind. People who have the same system and beliefs ideas they are, who actually share the same, whether it's religion or whatever, to themselves. They're going to cling to their own people, right? So this is why multiculturalism is it's nonsense, really and truly, right? Because you can't really, your legislation can't circumvent what the Heavenly Father has ultimately ordained, right? So that's pretty much it. But Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us His truth. Until next time, I say Shalom.